All right, the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 1059 The Zone, is driven by the Acura MDX, the award winning Acura MDX at the all new Acura of Jackson. Visit AcuraofJackson.com and you can see all the promotions and deals that they have going on at Acura of Jackson, located in Ridgeland. We want to welcome in our next guest, Dan Hope, Ohio State Buckeye Insider, 11warriors.com, among other things. And he joins us on the Coors Light guest line. You're listening to ESPN 1059 The Zone, and this is the Out of Bounds Show. Yes, this is the SEC Insider hit because we can tie Urban Meyer into the SEC after his outstanding tenure or run at Ohio State. Dan, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, man. So you dropped the article last week, and I thought it was really good as far as breaking down what Urban Meyer was able to do with 5-star, 4-star, 3-star athletes, and not just that they got a chance to go to the NFL, but that they were selected in the NFL draft. And then on top of that, Ohio State has had 4 of the last 5 defensive players, the first defensive player in the draft outside of Myles Garrett, has been from Ohio State. That got my wheels turning. You and I went back and forth on Twitter. That's why you're on now. You know, Saban has stole the show in the headlines for the most part with the amazing run that he's had with the NFL draft. Could I argue that Urban is right there with him, if not better, at developing elite talent in college and actually putting it in a better position to be successful in the NFL, Dan?
Yeah, I think you could certainly, make the argument either way on that one. But I think, if you look at what those two schools have done, over the past half decade, Alabama has had 48 draft picks. Ohio State has had 45 draft picks. And that's a pretty significant margin over everyone else. So I think, what both of those two schools have done in recent years has been phenomenal for both of them. When it all starts in recruiting, it starts with finding the right guys in recruiting, and then it's developing those guys over the course of their college careers, whether those are 3, 4, 5 years, to getting them to the NFL draft. And I think, over a consistent basis, we saw LSU certainly did it, with this past year having 14 guys in the draft. Clemson certainly done it. Georgia's done it. But over a consistent basis, those are the two schools, and certainly those efforts led by Nick Saban and Urban Meyer, that have most consistently developed, recruited, and put guys in the NFL draft.
And when you look at Urban, like Saban, he did it at 2 different schools. I mean, what he produced and sent on to the league at Florida, again, elite, world-class type stuff. And then what he did at Ohio State. How would you describe the different – and Jim Tressel did an amazing job in Columbus, Ohio. But how would you describe the difference as far as level of talent, recruiting, between what Jim Tressel did, which was good, and what Urban Meyer did once he took the job, Dan?
Well, I think one of the big things Urban did, I think Tressel, they got guys from all over, but it was still with Tressel, it was mostly Ohio-centric recruiting. It was mostly Midwest-centric recruiting. When Urban came in, he really turned it into a national recruiting approach. So I think he took the program to a different level in terms of targeting guys from all over the country and going, to the West Coast or the Southeast or, Texas, wherever it was, wherever the talent was, he was really aggressive in terms of, trying to find the best players no matter where they grew up, no matter where they went to high school. And so I think that took the program to a new level just in terms of the amount of talent that they're bringing in. And I think, they're, much like I think Nick Saban is as well, I think, they're also very aggressive on the recruiting trail of pitching this fact that, hey, we can get you to the NFL. We get more guys to the NFL than almost any other school. So I think, that became a big part of, their brand during the Urban Meyer era, and I think Ryan Day and his staff are only looking to continue that now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, it's a loaded roster. It'll be interesting to see if Ryan can do all the things that we're talking about that Urban has been able to do, not just 90%, because to get to the title game and win it is so difficult. And so Urban and Saban and Dabo have proven, that they can do it and do it consistently. We're visiting with Dan Hope, Ohio State Buckeye insider, 11warriors.com. Dan threw up a great piece last week and kind of walked you through the incredible impact Urban Meyer had at Ohio State. Of course, we know all about it with Florida, and then Dan Mullen comes to Mississippi State, and it's not a blue blood program. He takes good talent, not elite talent, and sends a record number of guys to the NFL the last 10 drafts, which, again, there's something – why do you think Urban is so – I mean, he understands you go get the best players. But we have other programs that have been going and getting the best players, Dan, and they're not winning. Miami, Texas, USC are just three that jump out at me. So what else is it about what Urban is able to do as far as culture, probably a brutal, grueling, but high-level strength and conditioning program? What is it about Urban that makes him so special after covering him for years?
Well, I think such a huge part of it as to be a successful head coach and to successfully develop talent is it's not just you, it's about the staff that you build around you. And, being at Ohio State throughout his time there and still, ongoing today, the guy whose name you're going to hear all the time from players and coaches is Mickey Marotti, who's been their strength and conditioning guy since Urban started there. And he's a huge part of building that culture and bringing guys to the NFL. And then, of course, your assistant coaches, those are the guys that are working with guys in practice every single day to develop their skill sets. So that's such a huge part of it. And I think Urban, has done an excellent job of that throughout his career. You mentioned Dan Mullen, so many other guys as well. I think he's done an excellent job of putting the right assistants around him who also know how to develop that talent. And that's such a key thing because as the head coach, you can't work with everybody personally. You've got to have the right people in place to help your guys maximize their potential. And I think by and large, Urban did a great job of doing that, both at Florida and at Ohio State.
I mean, you start rolling through the names, it's pretty amazing. Zeke, Michael Thomas, Ward, the Bosa brothers, Chase from this year. It's one after another. Dan Hope, Ohio State Buckeye insider on the Coors Light guest line. You're listening to ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Do you think Urban Meyer will coach again?
I don't know. I think, initially there was more of a thought of, he's gonna come back, a year from now. And then, there were rumblings, of course, last year about the USC job and, that didn't materialize. And so I'm increasingly getting the feeling that, he's, feeling good where he's at right now. He's got, a great gig with Fox Sports. I think he's, enjoying not dealing with the 24/7 stress of being a college football coach. Now, could that change a couple years down the line? I certainly don't rule it out. He's a competitive guy. He's still a fairly young guy, and surely if he ever decides that he wants to come back to coaching, there's going to be no shortage of suitors because of everything we just talked about. But, I think right now, in his mind, he believes he is done coaching. I think that question is, does that competitive fire at some point in the next 2 years, burn up again to the point where he just feels like he's got to get back in?
Justin Fields. All right. So this is lining up for college football. I do believe that we're going to play college football. I know the SEC. I believe that the SEC is going to play college football this year. I guess we'll see what happens with the other Power 5 conferences. But I get the sense this is lining up Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence year in college football. Just talk about watching him play this past year, what he did well, what he needs to work on, and how good you think he can be in his last year in college before being a first-round pick, Dan?
Well, yeah, and I was just so impressed by just how immediately he came in and found success because, you kind of expect someone coming in a situation like that. He only came in January before the season, had only been on campus for 8 months. I thought we were going to see some growing pains early in the year and then progressively getting better. And he came out right away and just started performing at a high level immediately. I mean, he only threw one interception until the final game of the year when he had two in the game against Clemson. But, just overall for the season as a whole, I thought he played fantastic. I think he was more advanced as a passer than I thought he might be for someone who was in his first year as a starting quarterback. So now I think it's all just about continuing to expand that skill set. I think it's about, just continuing to improve on, reading defenses and throwing the ball downfield. But I don't think there's anything major. There wasn't anything from last year that stood out as, this is a glaring weakness for Justin Fields that teams are going to expose. I think he did, such a great job of navigating through the season. Of course, he had the knee injury down the stretch, and I think that did hamper him a little bit, especially in that playoff semifinal game, just because he wasn't as mobile. He didn't quite have the running ability that he does when he's healthy. But, certainly if he's healthy all year, I think he's got a chance to make a run at the Heisman Trophy. And like you said, I think, between him and Trevor Lawrence, that's going to kind of be the spotlight all year long, whether it's Heisman Trophy, number one overall draft pick, you name it. I think, those are going to be the two guys who, at least entering the season, are going to be the storyline.
Dan Hope, Ohio State Buckeye Insider, 11warriors.com. He joins us on the Coors Light guest line. So Urban Meyer's run at Ohio State was wildly successful. Did he slightly underachieve with only one title, Dan?
I think it's a fair question because of the numbers that we talked about before, with the amount of guys that he produced in the NFL, the amount of talent that he recruited. I think, you look at that and you can definitely say Ohio State should have won multiple national titles with that talent. It still feels a little bit absurd to say when you consider the consistency with which Ohio State won games throughout his tenure. The fact that they, dominated their rival Michigan throughout that tenure. But I do think, certainly some Ohio State fans, are still left with that taste of, you look at some of the games that, they did lose, like, blowout losses on the road to unranked Iowa and Purdue teams. I do think, Ohio State fans still kind of cling on to those and think, man, if we could have just avoided, those pitfall losses, maybe we could have had, a couple more national championships. So, I don't want to say that he underachieved just because he had, such a by and large successful tenure at Ohio State. But I do think it's fair to say that with all that talent, he should have been able to win another national championship or two.
Fair enough. Dan Hope, Ohio State Buckeye Insider on the Out of Bounds show. Dan, how much do y'all get tired of hearing about the SEC in football?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that it personally affects me, but I do know that some of the fans do get sick of hearing about it. But a lot of it does. A lot of it comes down to what we were just talking about with the NFL draft, and you watched that a couple weeks ago, and it's kind of half the SEC and Ohio State and Clemson. The SEC is putting so much talent into the league that I think when you're doing that, you're going to continue to be viewed as the premier conference in college football. So, certainly I don't think that means that all the premier teams are in the SEC, but I think that, when that many players are getting selected in the first round, when, that many teams from the SEC are making such a big mark on the NFL draft, that perception that the SEC is a cut above everyone else isn't going to go anywhere.
And what about Harbaugh? So I know that's the rival. Well, I don't know if it is a rival the way y'all dominated them. Okay, but anyway, Michigan is, I've been on this thing for 17 years. It's an overrated program, but there is a lot there to talk about. Harbaugh has definitely kept them in the double-digit win category. Maybe that's just who they are. Maybe they're not what we've romanticized them to be coming out of World War II. And anyway, I thought Schembechler was, yeah, he never won one. I mean, good coach, but also somewhat overrated. Uh, how do y'all look at Michigan? Because I don't even know what it is, 15 to 16, 16 to 17, and then y'all played for titles and in the playoffs and won a natty and so on. Uh, Describe your thoughts on Harbaugh and Michigan and what they really are, Dan.
Yeah, and I think the reality is there's a pretty significant gap right
Yeah.
now between where Ohio State is, and a lot of that is because of what, Urban Meyer built there, and where Michigan is. And I think, the problem for Michigan is when Jim Harbaugh came, and he was supposed to be the savior. He was supposed to be the guy. And, I think, Ohio State fans would love to see Harbaugh stay there for many years because Ohio State has dominated year in and year out. But at the same time, there's the question of, okay, if Michigan moves on from Harbaugh, who do they bring in? Is that coach out there that could really take Michigan, to that elite level? I don't know. There's not really a good answer to that question. So I do think, I think it's getting increasingly difficult for Michigan to close that gap. I don't know if Harbaugh can do it at this point. I would lean toward thinking he can't, but I also am not sure who can, and I think that's the problem.
Yeah, I don't have them as a top 10 program. I mean, I just don't. In fact, they don't even get consideration. I mean, I can throw out 10 programs easily, and I get it. They're a big school, big alumni base. You know, college football was driven through, in my opinion, Dan, those three universities up there coming out of World War II, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan. You know, we didn't have the cachet for decades, and then it flipped. But I think it would be insane to move off of him because I think they go backwards fast. The fact that he is at least throwing up double-digit win seasons, that's kind of who they are, Dan.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think they're just not, they're not at that elite level right now. I think really, you look at right now, there's a very small group of truly elite programs. Ohio State's in there, and Alabama and LSU and Clemson and Oklahoma and Georgia are in there, but there's just not a lot of schools up in the northern part of the country that are really in there right now. I think that's one big thing that's really helped Ohio State is I think Ohio State has really kind of separated itself from the pack in terms of the Midwest programs because Notre Dame's not what it used to be. Michigan's not what it once was. Penn State's kind of hanging around, but they're still not quite at that level.
Right.
And so I think there's a gap right now between Ohio State and all those programs, and I don't think there's any quick fix for Michigan that's going to suddenly get them to elite level. It's going to take a really good run of recruiting classes like what we've seen at Ohio State for Michigan to have a chance to get to that level.
Right. Dan Hope, Ohio State Buckeye Insider on the Coors Light guest line. Blake, you got a question for Dan?
Yeah, real quick, Dan. Blake Scott here. With Joe Burrow having the season that he had, obviously no one saw LSU changing their entire complexity on offense, but they did it. He puts up arguably the best quarterback season in college football history. Perfect year. Ohio State doesn't get to play him because they fall just short against Clemson. But with him having such a tie to Ohio State and going first overall, is there any conversation amongst fans or even maybe coaching staff up there about letting Joe Burrow slip away?
Oh,
I think the thing about it was that they had Dwayne Haskins, and then Dwayne Haskins had the most prolific passing season in Ohio State history, and they didn't let him. They didn't want to let him go. He went on to be a first round pick, and then you bring in Justin Fields, and now you have Justin Fields for another year. So certainly, you look at what Joe Burrow did, and you think, man, what could have been if Joe Burrow had stayed at Ohio State. But I ultimately feel like it worked out as a win-win for everybody because, Ohio State goes from, its most prolific passer or prolific passing season at least ever to Justin Fields, who's probably going to go down as one of Ohio State's best quarterbacks ever if he has the type of season he's capable of this year. And then obviously it worked out as well as it possibly could have for Joe Burrow and LSU. So I think it was just one of those situations where the timing just didn't work out for Joe Burrow at Ohio State, and LSU, of course, reaped the rewards.
Dan, that's a good answer. Dan, I tell you what, man, that I know it was probably gut-wrenching, but that Clemson-Ohio State game was unbelievable this year.
It was. It was quite a game. Certainly one that Ohio State fans are still a little salty about, but it was quite a game to cover.
Man, the back and forth, that was a heavyweight fight. And be interesting to see how Ryan Day develops. Can he be the next combination of Dabo, Urban, Saban, Ogeron, whatever? You never know what the exact recipe is, but I know Ohio State Buckeye fans are expecting another title sooner than later. But the talent that Urban recruited and developed to Columbus, incredible. And it doesn't look like Day and them are slowing down. So we'll see how that looks. Dan Hope, Ohio State Buckeye Insider on the Out of Bounds Show. Dan, we enjoyed it, buddy. We'll have to do it again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, man. Dan Hope on the Out of Bounds Show, 11warriors.com. So Blake and I saw the article that he threw out. Urban is tied heavily to the SEC, and Urban's tied to Starkville. Just because Dan Mullen was his top offensive assistant for the most part. I mean, Kyle Whittingham was there too, and I know what happened. He never left Utah, but Mullen was with Urban at Notre Dame, at Bowling Green, at Utah, and at Florida. And he comes to Mississippi State, and neither State or Ole Miss have really, in the modern era, have ever seen anything
Close
like
to it, yeah.
the 37 NFL draft picks that Dan has been able to recruit and develop to Starkville.
Why do we not talk about the Urban tree the way we talk about the Saban tree? Because inarguably, Kyle Whittingham and Dan Mullen are 10 times better than anything that's come out of Nick Saban's coaching.
Yeah, because who would be Nick's number one?
Kirby?
Jimbo? Jimbo's got a title.
I guess. So Jimbo, then Kirby.
Jimbo, then Kirby. Unless you want to go Will Muschamp.
No
I'm kidding.
comment.
I mean, Lane Kiffin is now part of his tree, right?
Yeah, I guess
I mean,
that does.
he's
That
Pete
counts.
Carroll, too.
Counts, I
But
guess.
it's rare that a guy, I mean, Lane's pretty fortunate. He has two Hall of Fame monsters, on his resume. It's unusual you get to do that. Carroll at USC and then Saban at Alabama. But that's a good point, Blake. Why we don't talk about Urban's tree as much as Saban's. Hour number 3. Steve Robertson coming up next.